What comes to mind when you think about living large? A huge house with a pool and a theater? A closet full of the trendiest shoes and clothes? A luxury car? Or the latest electronic gadgets? Today we begin a conversation about money. And not actually money, but more our attitude about money. We're going to dive into this idea that living large might not actually be about what we possess, but about what we release. If you take an honest look in the mirror, is your heart ruled by an attitude of generosity or greed? No one ever admits to struggling with greed. It's a subtle struggle that creeps on us. Like it or not, greed is a seed that is planted in the heart of every human being, and it's like a slow-growing cancer that, if not dealt with, will never stop growing until it overruns and overtakes our life like a garden consumed by weeds. Greed is this desire to consume more, to gain more. It's the idea that you're consumed with those desires to consume, always wanting and never satisfied. Greed knows no socioeconomic boundaries. And let me say it in another way. There are greedy rich people and greedy poor people. Why? Because greed isn't about money. It's about your heart. Greedy people talk a lot about money. They're not cheerful givers. They're reluctant to share. They fight over insignificant sums of money and talk as if they have just enough to get by. They won't let you forget what they have done for you, and they're reluctant to express gratitude. They save carefully but give sparingly. They're not content with what they have, and they attempt to control people with their money or their possessions. For a greedy person, stuff is life. The greedy person has bought into the lie that my stuff is my life, and so if somebody tampers with it, asks for it, or damages it, they are threatening my personal security. Their stuff becomes an extension of who they are. And it's not just about the way you view the things that you don't have, it's also about the way that you view the things that you do have. Greed's goal is to choke us of real life, so the only thing we can do is relentlessly rip out its roots from the soil of our heart. So, what does God have to say about greed? Ephesians 5:3 says this: "Let there be no sexual immorality, impurity, or greed among you. Such sins have no place among God's people." Wow. Can you believe that greed is a big enough deal to make that list? Why would God not want greed to be among his people? Well, let's take a look at these next verses to see what greed does. Proverbs 15:27 says, "A greedy and grasping person destroys community." Proverbs 28:25 says, "Greed causes fighting. Trusting the Lord leads to prosperity." God doesn't want greed among his people because greed destroys people. Let's take a look at one more story that Jesus shared, found in the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 15 through 21. Then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all of my crops." Then he said, "I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all the wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool! You will die this very night, and then who will get everything that you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Did you catch that? God blessed the farmer with an abundance of crops, more than he had ever had, more than he could ever use or even store. But rather than seeing this blessing as a gift and an opportunity to help others around him, he built a bigger space so that he could hold on to more of it. The man's heart would never be satisfied. His attitude towards his possessions was off. So, what can we do to fight greed that creeps up in our own lives? Well, first, we can put Jesus first and recognize that he alone brings life and fulfillment. Greed says you need possessions to find true life, but God says you need Jesus to find true life. When we live our life for possessions, we are essentially saying that Jesus is not enough. but God reminds us all that Jesus is all we need. And second, we can practice generosity. Start giving stuff away. Let go of that need to have everything. Share what you have. Generosity reminds us that life is not about all of our stuff. When I give, I acknowledge that I trust that God is enough and that God will take care of me. For some of you, this might not be that big of a deal, but for others, this might be really hard. I want you to think of giving like exercise. You don't get in shape before you start exercising. You start exercising so that you can get your body into shape. You don't wait until you have everything you need and need nothing more before you start giving. You give now. If you can't give away $1 when you have 10, you definitely won't give away 1,000 when you have 10,000. You can't wait until your heart toward money and possessions have changed, because the way God changes your heart is through you giving. So fight back against that green-eyed monster this week. Start living large by letting go of what you have, by focusing less on what you don't have and more on what you do have, by being grateful and recognizing all that God has given you, and by being generous and sharing what you have been given.